Alrighty everyone, welcome back. It is now March 22nd of 2025, and given that there's a lot of drama, a lot of backlash toward Snow White 25, starring both Rachel Zegler, Gal Gadot, and among others, we already know that this movie is just failing across the board, whether it's from actual Disney fans or newcomers that are just checking out this movie. It's not resonating with anybody, and that all has a lot to do with the fact that it was Rachel Zegler just a couple of years ago that made all those terrible PR decisions by making some of the worst comments out there towards Snow White 1937, the concept of the prince and the princess, all of these different concepts that were mocked by her, and that was just the very beginning of it all, and how it just snowballed after that, no pun intended. But what's interesting about all of this is that we know that there's a lot of things going on right now between Bob Iger, the board of directors, and the creatives behind Snow White. Let's get into this. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new, and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. So one thing is for certain about this film is that we know that Bob Iger, we know that the rest over at Disney are just frightened about this movie. They are trying to hide this thing at all costs, like no tomorrow. They want to get this movie done and over with, put it in the rearview mirror, and just call it a day. Now, one thing about this is that we already know that they canceled the UK premiere, they dialed back on the US premiere some days ago, and now we're going to go into what's going on with the financial collapse surrounding Snow White, and how Bob Iger recently made a sudden decision that is obviously backfiring on his image and the Disney image as a whole. Now, what's interesting about all of this is that when you take a closer look at this movie in particular, we already know that it is basically the epitome of the Disney messaging, right? The Disney ideology that they have doubled down on for the past several years, but with the Snow White negative reviews still rolling in toward Disney, and how even the trusted critics by the Disney company are now actually turning against them, one major development involves more to do with a recent sudden action that was made by Disney executives and Bob Iger, the CEO, in response to all the negative press surrounding Snow White. Now, a crucial update to this entire situation now involves how Bob Iger and the board made an official decision to immediately cut back on funds for their marketing campaign that added up to a total of $15 million in cost cutting for the marketing of the film. This included significant cutbacks on, get this, TV spots, ads, commercials, etc. for the film, as they desperately are trying to hide this movie at all costs from the general public. To make matters worse for the financial collapse situation surrounding Snow White is that along with this in the box office projections, Bob Iger recently decided to cancel another special event that was going to take place at Disney World in Orlando, Florida, where both Rachel and Gal were supposed to be on stage together taking questions in front of the Disney castle. The cancellation of this event reportedly led Disney to losing a total of $4 million that was spent on the event that was going to include a dedicated fireworks show and drone show for the Snow White film. Now, all the while, of course, all of this has been called off. The drone show itself was best described significantly expensive and made up for at least 25% of the $4 million budget for this event. The worst situation of all right now for Disney is that they recently canceled 60% of their merchandise for Snow White, which included clothing, figurines, dolls, toys, and other for sale items that would be either sold in the parks and or in the stores. The Seven Dwarves merchandise was the first set of merchandise to go, since they actually decided on those characters that they were eventually concluding that they weren't necessarily kid-friendly, essentially due to their freakish appearance. Now, the entire cancellation of Disney's merchandise for Snow White, some of that merchandise was indeed completed, estimating to a total of around $20 million that is now going to be all lost for the Disney company. Bob Iger and the board felt this was a necessary move to save whatever is left of their image as they desperately try to improve Bob Iger as Disney's CEO before he plans to step down in 2026. Now guys, you may very well recall that the same exact thing happened in like June to August of 2024 with the Acolyte series, where they also had a major financial collapse when it came to merchandise, when it came to events, when it came to everything that they wanted to do to gain more money for the Star Wars brand, and it just flipped upside down for them, right? They had so much merchandise on the table that was all sitting ready to go, A lot of it was canceled, a lot of it was just all, wasted funds that went into the merchandise of that actual brand. And the same exact thing is happening here with Snow White. Now, it can really make you wonder exactly what in the world is Disney thinking. If they went through this with the Acolyte, you would think that they would have taken the necessary steps beforehand about what was going to happen with Snow White when it came to merchandise, when it came to everything else related to the marketing campaign. But that's exactly why I keep saying that Bob Iger is an incompetent CEO. He never truly gets it. He never truly understands anything until it's too late. And I think Snow White is the best example of hitting that deadline or hitting that brick wall finally where you really can't go anywhere at this point. This is like the end of Disney when it comes to Disney live-action remakes based on animated classics. Now, yes, we know that there will be exceptions. We know that there are positive buzz surrounding Lilo and Stitch and stuff like that, but we're talking about the traditional animated films that so many grew up with for multiple decades that are actually Disney's trying to attempt to bring those into live action, some of which have been called off, which I think really is a major sign. They already took a deep pause on the Hercules remake, the Sword in the Stone remake, along with a comeback for Alice in Wonderland. Those top three, they're trying to rethink their strategy, and I think that's a very revealing aspect by Bob Iger. Now, here's another thing, is that the financial collapse surrounding this film specifically, however, is not just limited to all that was mentioned, but also how actual props from the film sets were going to be sold. The final collapse, of course, surrounding this financial situation and the backlash was reportedly so strong that Disney actually called up their plans to sell some of the actual on-set props that were used for Disney's Snow White just to avoid gaining more attention toward the film. Already, Rachel Zegler was reportedly enraged over Disney's decision to cut back on their marketing strategy to this extent that she took it very personally. And look, we already know that Rachel Zegler is taking a lot of things personally in 2025. Given that this movie was supposed to set her up with Disney, we already talked about this many times, that she was supposed to have a very extensive Disney contract deal. We're talking about multiple movies, whether on screen or doing voiceover work for things like Toy Story 5, all of which have been called off. They don't want to deal with Rachel Zegler ever again. They want to call it quits with her, and they have, quite frankly, and they really just put her to the wayside. And I think it was best for everybody to just part ways from Zegler, because we all know what she did leading up to this point. We all know what she continues to do as she, tries to go into damage control over the film, and it's not working. The drama between herself and Gal, that also did not help the actual, stance on this film and how it really stands as a Disney movie. But again, like I've said so many times before in the past, this is typical Bob Iger, typical Disney, to go into this, curl mode where they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do anymore once they're boxed into a corner. All they can do is really just say, you know what, we give up, we're going to do whatever we have to do to get past this, and that's that. That's what they're doing with the marketing campaign cutbacks. That's exactly what they're doing with the cancellation of the merchandise. $20 million down the drain. It's literally just throwing money down the toilet. That's what happened with the merchandise surrounding Snow White. Very much a near similar situation to what happened with the Acolyte series back in July, to be very specific, a couple of weeks after that show dropped. But I would like to hear what everyone has to say about Snow White as a whole, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.